Tech is taking a big old dump today. Crypto is hitting some key levels of resistance. We got GDP data tomorrow. We have some tech earnings to discuss. All of that and more today on Money Never Sleeps. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Before we get going, hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel. Nothing Kevin or I say is financial advice, so please do your own research before making any buys or sells. Kev, the NASDAQ is getting pummeled today, down 2.5%. We can see NVIDIA down almost 4.5%. Google is getting absolutely destroyed, down almost 10% on the day. Microsoft had great earnings, still up, but it's been, those that gains from earlier have been cut considerably down. It's about 2.8% up on the day, but everything else is in red. We got Meta reporting earnings after the close today. They are holding on to that $300 per share level right now, down 3.8% on the day. Tomorrow is going to be Amazon, MasterCard. We got some new home sales data. We got Q3 GDP tomorrow. We got a new Speaker of the House. There's a lot of shit going on right now, my man. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. You know what actually isn't down? The UVIX. It's up 15% today, guys. So volatility is definitely kicking in. I fucking love to see it. Even if there is manipulation in the world, at least we're seeing TradFi kind of reacting to a lot of the stuff that's going on. I'm very excited for this week, both in just seeing what the GDP number comes out and also PCE. It's almost like the perfect storm. We're also seeing that some of the tech giants, right, the darlings of this entire fucking market, are starting to see some cracks in the system. And I honestly think, and I'll make a conviction bet, it just takes one more of these companies and we're going to start seeing a lot more fear in the tech sector, and it's going to bleed into a lot of ones that are, a lot of companies are down already on the year, or they're not just nearly as up as some of these other tech companies. So if these start to bleed, you're going to start seeing the others bleed even more. So I'm very excited to see how some of these earnings play out this week too.
Yeah, that's going to be a really interesting point. We've said a lot of these earnings expecting to be good. It wasn't quite that way for
I was
Google
wrong
yesterday. That was definitely wrong. Microsoft was, it was 50-50, so it's not bad. We'll see what it looks like today for Meta. That's going to be really curious with their ads. Like, a lot of their stuff is ad revenue. As we discussed, more and more small businesses are struggling. Are we seeing a decline in Meta ad revenue? And if so, look out. That stock could take a big hit after hours today. Amazon as well. Like, there's been some issues with, Prime days, and they've got a lot of backlash there. Are we going to see problematic earnings on that one? And then, later this week on Friday, we get personal income, personal spending, PCE. We're going to see the latest inflation data. The Fed's in a really weird spot. Fed's in a really, really weird spot because expectations for Q3 GDP first reading tomorrow are crazy. They're expecting 4.7%. which is an absolute bonkers number, more than double what we saw in Q2. And it's just like this constant, like, the Fed is, they're kind of fucked at the moment. Like, they've already basically committed that they're not going to raise next Wednesday. So a week from now, Jay Powell should be wrapping up his presser, and we'll be hearing kind of what his thoughts are. But if they raise rates further, you would think that they can, based off of what we're seeing in GDP and spending. Like, people are not slowing down their spending, even though there's credit card debt is going higher, amount of savings is going down for people. People are just spending. Like, I don't know what the rationale is, if they think that the government is going to bail them out and they can just, like, get rid of this debt, no big deal. But man, it is a tough setup for J-Pow.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's almost like they've committed to the collapse already, or like just given up on the fact that, hey, we got this shit under control. They're already pushing back to, like, I think it was late 2025 that they'll be at 2% inflation. I think that was what the number was today. Someone spoke, I can't remember what it was, but that was like, there was thoughts of it last week when a lot of the Fed speakers were talking, where it was like maybe mid 2025 we'll be seeing 2% inflation. Now they're pushing it back even further. I think if they don't do anything, obviously it's going to it's still higher for longer, right? It still is going to impact. We're starting to see a lot of bankruptcies for smaller businesses. Those that aren't seeing nearly as much revenue. They're also the ones that are most likely to hurt based off whatever loans they have. If they pulled any out, variable rates, stuff like that. We got to keep an eye on. But it is not good. I think it's also a big fallacy. I sent that thing to you in house yesterday about savings rates versus actual, credit card debt, and we can see that the gap. It's such a massive gap in between the two, right? We're seeing credit cards just fly straight up, how much debt that consumers are taking out on them, and then we're seeing the savings rate just lower than what a lot of people are actually saying it is. So I think that there's a huge spread in between that, and that's eventually going to lead to something that's going to break something in the system. The Fed right now, I don't know if they do something, they're fucked. If they don't do something, they're equally as fucked.
Yeah, I'm looking at the spreads here for target rate probabilities because they have them all the way out through December of 2024. I mean, it is a fucking mess, man. Like no one like it just feels like they're just going to keep kicking the can down the road for interest rates, and they could still be raising in like January or February, or sorry, January or March of next year. It's like, are we really going to be 2 years of interest rate hikes, like piddle dicking around over here when they could have just ripped the Band-Aid off? Like it's so annoying, man. We're just delaying the inevitable over and over and over again. Like whatever expectation there was and whatever, like, we'll see what PCE shows on Friday. Clearly they're not raising next week, so we'll get to see the October data in November, but this is just, and inflation's going, like we're seeing it like start to trickle back up. Like it's a slow increase, and it could be a big increase when we hear about businesses like continuing to raise prices. Like it is just this market is just so stupid. It's so stupid right now.
There's a lot of things, and again, everyone knows how fucking skeptical I am about everything in this market. It just seems so odd that we're having these conflicts overseas while things are looking horrible here, right? And I always say that the United States is the last resort for the global economy. Everything rides on the United States and the U.S. dollar. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some type of news. We know that they're pushing back the ground invasion. Now we're getting some news about that. House can even elaborate on this because he probably knows a lot more. But I wouldn't be surprised if we get some type of news of escalation or something like that come Friday with PCE data if it's a hot number. I'm just saying, if that's the case, all bets are off. This market's going to absolutely turbo nuke. Again, if we get a bad earnings today or tomorrow from Amazon or Meta, it's another thing that's just going to be like, it's kind of scary right now in this market. Anything could happen. Even if I'm saying nuke, it doesn't have to nuke like 20% today, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like the bottom falls
With
from underneath.
news
There's a good
that
chance.
Russia is testing out nuclear weapons, we probably need to remove the term nuke from discussing
That's true.
market prices,
Yeah.
because I mean shit's getting fucking out there.
We'll start calling it a dump. Yeah.
Yeah,
I like dumps.
That's probably a better approach to take because shit could be getting real bad out there. Okay. What else is on your radar at the moment? We've seen the NASDAQ, it's continuing to go down, now over 2.5%. VIX is back over 20, DXY over 106.50. Nothing is really being spared at the moment. Gas, oil is on its way back up. Gold is having a solid day, back toward $2,000. Bond yields, the 30-year is back over 5. It's having a really strong day. So bonds are getting a little bit of a run up here. The 5, 10, on the longer duration bonds are having a really good day. So what else do you think that we need to be watching at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting with the S&P right now. Let's just go to the major 3 indices, and then we'll talk about some of the other stuff right now and where people are necessarily putting their money. We're starting to see a really big break in the S&P, also with the NASDAQ. 2 levels that were key have been broken. And I warned everyone about this maybe about 2-3 weeks ago. I said, if we get below 4250 on the S&P, there's a good chance that we could start seeing that bottom fall out. We're going to see a lot more machine selling from a lot of these trading desks. It seems like that's the case, right? We went back yesterday to test 42. What was the close at yesterday? We were at 4247.69. We went above 4250, but we got rejected right there. That 200 EMA is just standing as huge resistance, and this 4250 line is also resistance there. So we got rejected off it, and we had a nasty day today, negative 1.41. We're at 4187. I wouldn't be surprised if we're getting closer to that, sub 40,000 or it's 40,000, sub 4,000 for the S&P in the coming months. I don't think that that's too far away given how much volatility there is in the system right now. And again, look at this 50 moving average and 200 moving average on the daily. They're getting closer. Every close below the 200 EMA is 100% another day closer to a death cross, just the way it is. We filled that gap up here. Now we're going down. This is going to be a really interesting one to watch. S&P obviously correlates to the VIX, and we're seeing the VIX doing pretty good today. The VIX they crushed recently, but again, we're closing above the 200 on the VIX and the 50 moving average. So this 50 is probably going to cross this 200 in the coming days. Next thing you know, we're going to have a golden cross in the VIX. And whenever we do see a golden cross, we do see a pretty good move up for the VIX because that means that there's volatility in the S&P. People are not necessarily sure where they want to put their money. So we're seeing 9.12% up for the VIX right now. The NASDAQ's the big one I think we need to cover. I talked about this descending triangle, and this is a massive pattern, right? You hit our head, ass, head, ass, head. Now we're losing our ass right here. This is 14,416 that we were trying to hold the support. We're closing below it right now. We're at 14,376. Don't get me wrong, this could just be a wick down on the weekly, and we could bounce up in the next coming days. But we want to keep an eye on this because that was just Google pretty much just caused a lot of this to come down. I'm not going to say that Tesla wasn't a huge part of it as well, right? That's part of the descent that we were seeing. But with those two, if we get another bad earnings from one of the top 7, 3 out of 7 missing earnings or just having bad numbers, there's a good chance that this could absolutely start to topple and we could just lose this end, come closer to 1475 or no, my bad, 14,175 right down here at the 200 EMA. And that could offer a good level of support. But once again, that 50 is going to start coming down and closer. We're not too far off from death crossing this, especially if we start closing below this 200 EMA. But I think if we do start closing below the 200 EMA, we have way bigger problems in this market because that means that the top 7 are no longer holding this market up, and that's a very scary thing to see. So NASDAQ, huge level that we crossed. We're going to probably close below it today, but I want to see how this closes on the weekly. That's going to be very important. And again, if we look on the weekly, we are oversold, but it doesn't matter. Markets can crash from oversold. It's happened in the past. You look at the monthly, we still got plenty of room to go to the downside. So I'm not too concerned with what we're seeing here. And if we really want to be assholes, we could say that this is deviation on the macro scale on the monthly, lower high. And now we have to go down and test whatever is down here. So for me, obviously, NASDAQ, bigger picture down here, but we'll get into that. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We just stick to what's important today. Down 380 for the day. Pretty impressive move, 2.5% down. The Dow, this is monthly. We look at this on the daily. You can see it's getting close to that death cross, right? Another day of red. We're down 95 points. It's not crazy, but at the same time, if we really want this to be prevented, we'd have to push up above the 200 EMA and the 50 EMA. Still possible, but I don't necessarily think that this is serving as good level of support. Once we hit the 50, we got rejected right off of it. And again, the Dow is in a pretty much a free fall, I think, in my opinion, closer to the end of this, at the beginning of this origin of this parallel channel that we've been putting in since roughly March of 2023, so the banking crisis. So this has kind of been like a buffer, kind of just like holding itself, and then eventually broke out of this parallel channel. We lost the 34,347, which is a huge level of resistance, and now we're getting the death cross here. I mean, from where we are to where the origin is, that's another 4.79% drop. It's possible. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on. Doesn't seem great. We lost a lot of support on key levels in this market. We're seeing a lot of these big companies that have so much dominance over everything else start to bleed out. And the one thing that everyone was, saying was impossible, that the dollar was going to break down from here. Well, guys, guess what? The dollar's above this parallel channel right now, this bull flag. There's a good chance that we can go to 107. We can even climb higher. I think a lot of people are trying to get risk off, and that's why we're seeing the dollar absolutely, dominate right now. We got plenty of room to the upside here. I mean, if we just want to go to gold too, I mean, gold's up $11 today. Had a bit of a pullback back here, went to 1960 or something like that. But even though it's overbought, this could just be FOMO. It could be a blow off top where people are just terrified of what happens. They want to be risk off. I mean, we could see this thing shoot up to the top of this. We could go to all time highs with gold. But the fact that I'm seeing the dollar go up, the VIX go up, and the gold go up right now, it's not a recipe for anything great in this market. I think it's a very scary place to be exposed in TradFi. I'm not saying that it can't bounce again, but it's definitely a place where anything could really happen because there's so many factors that come into play, and there's so many things out there that could absolutely just dump the market. I had to use the right terminology there.
Big old dump. Yeah, it's I don't know, man. I don't get the vibe that it's risk on season, despite some people leading you to believe. Let's hit a few of the crypto charts.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then we can begin to kind of wrap it. There's not too much else to discuss. I will want to get into it tomorrow with some of the meta earnings and what that's going to mean for the other bigger tech players.
Definitely. I'm going to give you two scenarios when it comes to Bitcoin, right? I honestly think that we have been on the lower time frames. I haven't been looking at the daily too much recently because if you do, you're looking at absolute insanity, how much this is pumped up and how many gaps it's created below. So what I've been doing, I've been looking for deviation. I found some over here, and then it would have been a really good idea to short Bitcoin or any of the alts up when we got this second lower high. Obviously, it dropped from where we currently are around 34.5 down to 33,210. So that's about a 4% drop. So that wasn't a bad trade there. I didn't get in on it, but I'm definitely looking for those types of deviations in the market right now. I think those are going to offer a pretty good sign of what's going on. I don't necessarily see a lot of people buying spot Bitcoin, which is very concerning, right? Spot is pretty much means that you're holding the actual asset. You can either move it off chain. I'm seeing a lot of people use perps, futures contracts. That's personally what I'm using too. But that's not a good sign for sustainable growth, right? That means that no one is able to transfer one position to another where they're buying an asset and they're selling it to someone else who's going to hold it. That's how you see, consolidation. You see the price being able to be sustained because there's actual buyers for this. There's no buyers, in my opinion, from what I'm seeing. I'm seeing still, obviously, USDT and FDUSD being sent to Binance, these other exchanges, prices going up. There's a lot of levels of resistance. And then once we're finding a lot of resistance, but there's no buyers and we keep getting rejected, we push up. Key level, that was 3,400. I mean, we were below this. There was no buyers. We had to push up. Once we got above there was a lot of sellers. Then it shot up once again on the hourly. And now we went all the way to 35 and we got rejected once again. I mean, even if we want to look at this on the 4-hourly chart, I could say that this deviation here, this could be double deviation right here, double top. That's one scenario, right? And then we could expect to be going down somewhat into this range down here between 32.5 and 31.8. That's what we talked about yesterday. I will add that there is a good chance, and I say good because we know that they have the funds to push this market up as much as they want. The fact that they're hitting 35, I wouldn't be surprised if they push it to like 36 or so. What would that entail? That means obviously Bitcoin would be shooting up a little bit higher. There is some resistance, I believe, at 36 right here. Yeah, so let me just draw a line right here. Say like 36.25, 36.260 around there. We'll do this line. I think that it's possible that we could see another push up from here. A lot of people are already projecting that we're going to 40K. I don't fucking necessarily see that.
No, it's not a prediction. It's a guarantee because 40K is a magnet, Kevin.
And
it's a fucking magnet.
My mom used to say,
it's a fucking magnet.
Like I said in the past, you need a big fucking magnet. And my mom used to say, if I ever wanted to go out to eat, do you have, can we go to McDonald's? Mom was like, do you have McDonald's money? Well, it's like, do you guys have 40K money? I don't necessarily see anyone buying here. So you got to be cautious. It's really easy to fall into this. And this is the thing that pisses me off. I'm going to rant right here. Everyone's like, oh, Bitcoin's going to the fucking moon. Yeah, but guys, nothing's changed in the world of TradFi. Everything looks fucked. I'm sorry. This isn't a way for, Bitcoin was made for this. It was built for recessions. This is your fucking first test run at this shit. Bitcoin, I don't know if it's going to hold up in a recession. This shit can go below expectations, right? We don't know. Liquidity is absolutely bleeding.
Here's what people keep going on about is this is their indication is when their non-crypto native friends are texting them about, oh, I see Bitcoin's going up and ETH and all that stuff. Well, guess what? Those friends, they can barely pay their fucking mortgage. Like, they don't have the money to just ape into Bitcoin at 34K and help drive it back to 40. Those people are trying to figure out how to pay their fucking groceries, like a lot of people are right now, unfortunately.
It's impossible. Dude, it's so fucking hard.
I think it's like I hate being bearish. We're kind of at that point where a lot of people have capitulated to being like, you know what? It's just going to go up now. And maybe you and I end up being wrong. And that is a very real possibility because I'm never going to assume that I am right about fucking anything because you and I are just pawns in this bigger game. But god damn, if you look at every other bigger factor, it still sucks. Maybe the government will come in and save the day. Maybe they're going to turn the money printer on. Maybe we're magically going to have peace in the Middle East and Ukraine is going to be, and peace is going to be there and everything turns to sunshine and rainbows. but that doesn't seem like a likely outcome here. So, as I've been saying for a while, I'm comfortable with the way I'm positioned right now. I moved more cash into higher interest earning accounts because I just don't feel the need to rush my liquidity in to this current market structure. Like, I got my long-term holdings. I'm fine there. I feel great about it. But man, like, I could absolutely throw more cash into crypto, and I want to put more cash into crypto, but not here and not now.
Yeah, dude, it's fucking stupid. I'm sorry, I'm just speaking freely here, but it's stupid to think that everything that's going on in this world right now isn't going to impact the price of a stupid fucking digital coin, right? I'm not saying Bitcoin's stupid, but I'm just speaking freely to the point where it's like, guys, there's bigger problems in the world right now. No one cares about your fucking asset when they're all just scrambling for liquidity. Do you think the banks right now give two shits about the price of Bitcoin? Only to get out of their positions. That's about the only thing, right? I don't necessarily believe that we are in a place where liquidity is going to come in. I honestly think the Fed's given up personally. I think that they know there's something bad's going to happen. They're just waiting to see, well, is it going to happen before or after we raise the next rate, right? I think they've given up. I think for months they've been on the wrong side of things. They didn't raise rates even when they probably should have. But this is just built up for years. This needs to happen. I don't see the consumer being strong. The consumer's not going to push the price of Bitcoin up, right? Again, they haven't even approved the ETF. Let's get off the ETF shit too. ETF is not going to come. They don't have to approve it. They didn't approve it for 10 freaking years, right? It's it's just speculation and hopes and dreams. It's not going to save you from a recession. You got to be somewhat logical here. But let me just pull up this. This is the possible scenario where we get to 36, 259. It's a 5-wave move up, right? This is impulsive 100%. Even though it's manipulation, it's impulsive. We can't deny that fact. And so this is a possibility that we go to 36, 6, and maybe that's the top. Maybe this is the blow off top that we get, that final 5th wave. And we don't get to 40K. I think that we get up here, and maybe that's next move down is a good move down to 20K. And I say 20K just because there is a fair value gap there on the CME. And, I'm not even going to pull this right here. I'll just go straight to the CME chart. And that was the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. There's a futures contract down there for Bitcoin futures. And we talked about this a long time ago, but it was a CME gap that was created by, the open and close of one day where there's just a gap in between. And this happened in May of 2022. So right around the time of Terra Luna. And we never filled it, right? Price went down all the way. I didn't think we were going to fill it. I really didn't. I thought that this was the top of the market. I said that I was wrong, clearly. To the extent of which I'm wrong, I don't know. I think there's an assist there from Justin Sun and CZ, but this went right to it and it filled it completely, right? I think that this screwed over a lot of investors who never thought that this was going to get filled in TradFi. And now what happens here? Are we going to push up a little bit higher, maybe just to get more liquidity before pushing it down? It's very possible. We also have a gap down here at 20K. We haven't filled it yet. It happened back in March of 2023. So the banking collapse. So the two gaps are created by collapses in the system, one in both directions, right? Bank term funding program caused the gap to go up. So we have a gap to the downside at 20K. And then we got the one from Terra Luna, which happened when the price was going down. There's only 2 gaps in Bitcoin's history I learned today that haven't been filled, and the majority of everything else has been filled. Like this gap here has been filled. That's why we haven't filled it out or highlighted or anything like that. So these things tend to be filled because there's so much liquidity that lies in these areas. So is 20K off the table? Not at all. I think that 20K is probably going to be the next healthy correction for Bitcoin to that level, right? Obviously, targets have changed because the price has gone up. I'm going to be reasonable with everyone when it comes to that. But I also think that when you are printing money out of thin air, it's a good chance that eventually that's going to cause a huge liquidity run if that money isn't backed by anything. So Bitcoin, yeah, people say it can't hit 10K.
Can we get one of those money printers? Like, who do I got to talk to get me one of them money printers?
You might have to make love to a CEO of an exchange.
All right. Well, okay. Let's get into a different conversation. I mean, you always take it. Like, I try to set you up for something, and you just take it to the weirdest possible place, Kevin.
You do understand this is the way the world works, Jweb. There's evil out there, and they have the money printers, and they'll do anything to stay in power. And I'm talking about CZ. Again, I have no facts to back anything up. I'm just joking around here. Not true. He's a good guy, maybe. But yeah, let's look at it. He's not. Let's go to Bitcoin futures right here. And we can see that it's down to 20K, right? So I think that's the case. And how are we going to get there? Fucking Bitcoin dominance, guys. Bitcoin dominance has been on a tear right now. It's 54.4. It's terrible. I mean, that's terrible for risk assets, right? If we look at ETH BTC's pair, I mean, that thing's been bleeding out like crazy. Let's pull that up real quick just so y'all see what's happening to these Bitcoin pairs. Look at this. This thing looks like it's like reaching around and it wants to come back in time and touch the fucking June 22nd low. This looks like a Tim Burton tree from Edward Scissorhands. It looks terrible, right? It's just going straight down and it's like falling off a cliff. So I think this has got a lot of room to go to the downside because Bitcoin dominance is still extremely high. We could look at any pair. I mean, look, BNB to BTC is fucking doing like shit too. I mean, this thing looks like it's about to capitulate, right? And we're finding support right here, which is back in February 2021, but go below that. That's what? Drop from here to there. That's 30%. If Binance is in the place where Bitcoin dominance is extremely high and BNB's dominance keeps dropping, I mean, that's 50% there. I mean, it could go all the way down to 82%. It can go to zero if they collapse. And if we look at the dominance levels of some of these other assets, XRP obviously dropped significantly right there, right? That's because Bitcoin continues to climb. So we got that little pump in July. Now we don't have that. We can see that BNB dominance has been on a bleeding tear. We still have to go down, I think, to this 2.27% just to fill out this massive parallel channel that we have in Bitcoin BNB dominance. And then stable coins. Look at that. Just bleeding out like crazy. Just absolute red candle straight down once Bitcoin started to go up. This one's going to be, I'm curious to see how this one plays out because, again, if people do start to sell, then obviously dominance is going to go up for stable coins. But, I mean, we can go across the board. We see that there's a lot of things that are not lining up good for alts. Could they pump once again? Absolutely. But is this Bitcoin, dominance kind of telling us that, hey, Bitcoin decides to dump, are alts going to bleed just as much or even worse than Bitcoin? Absolutely. I think it's very possible that we see 60 to 80% still a huge drop from where we currently are for a lot of these things. In some cases, even 90 to 95. A lot of these shitcoins, the liquid markets, it's very possible they go from $110 million market cap down to 7.
All right. Anything else there? Otherwise, I am good to wrap up because I have a child that is beginning to wake from his nap.
Nothing too much. We do say that the House of Representatives did finally approve Speaker of the House. So a lot of political turmoil in the world. I still think that this is not a good look for the U.S. credit. There's a good chance that we still could get downgraded, especially as we head closer to a budget resolution that's coming up in November. We saw that Israel also got downgraded to a negative outlook from, I think it was S&P. So credit is still a huge issue. And if these downgrades do not help these the credit ratings for any of these countries, obviously it's just going to make it more expensive to borrow. So problems keep piling on. Just another thing that we should touch on because it's definitely going to play a huge factor in the coming weeks to months.
All right. We can talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. We'll also look at the earnings from Meta. We'll see what happens with Q3 GDP and the other economic data that's going to come out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning. So be on the lookout for that. Appreciate everybody for watching. Once again, if you're not, hit that like button. It's like a little thumbs up guy right there. Go ahead and hit that real quick. And then subscribe to the channel, drop some comments, share us out on social media, all of that good stuff. We really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome rest of your day. I'm going to go deal with a screaming child, and we will see you tomorrow.
Take care, everyone.